Death mocks your self-righteous laziness in Manual Samuel. Will you breathe easier waiting for someone else to exhale?
You'll have to survive 24 hours with a handicap I choose under my supervision.
Manual Samuel looks like it came straight off of Cartoon Network. It has simple animations that serve the gameplay well, as buttons control simple movements of the character's hinged limbs. The art style contributes to the game's humor, with plenty of visual gags sprinkled throughout, like funny signs on boxes and the exaggerated breathing of the main character. Manual Samuel is a 2D limb mover in a similar vein to Octodad. You're tasked with simple actions that are generally ignored in other games, such as getting dressed one leg at a time, keeping your spine straight, breathing, and blinking. You'll face a string of simple challenges that test your bodily coordination.
Each button controls a function of your body, like stepping with one of your legs or grabbing an object with one of your hands. The challenge of the game comes from pressing these buttons in the right order and at the right time. Each level is a new set of challenges with a decent amount of gameplay variety that changes up how you'll use your limbs. One level has you driving a car, another requires you to speak by stopping a meter on the correct word, yet another has you destroy robots with simple combat. Most of the interactions are contextual, so any action outside of walking, blinking, and breathing will feel different depending on the level. The variety does slow the game down, as several levels begin with their own tutorials.
This variety comes at the cost of consistency in the control scheme, which interrupts your muscle memory and negates any feeling that you might be getting better at the game. For instance, the buttons for breathing might be used to change ammo types in one level, and then be completely useless in the next. For a game that relies so much on memorizing controls to perform repetitive actions, it's baffling that the main mechanic would be undermined in this way.
Most of the action is slow-paced to accommodate the coordination required to react, so the game isn't very difficult, but some levels are more frustrating than others. The controls for driving in particular were intentionally obtuse and seemed inconsistent when trying to get the car started. But the game will throw hints at you in most situations that tell you exactly what button to press, if you have that feature on.
The ending of the game is an exception, as the speed and difficulty ramps up dramatically in the final level. Here, you'll begin to notice how unresponsive the controls are, and how frustrating the consistent injection of new mechanics can be. The final boss requires that you juggle a brand new combat mechanic, with memorizing multiple patterns, and hoping that the game registers your button presses in time. Failure is punished, with the same line of dialogue repeated until you turn off the game and find something better to do with your time. This is where the fun ends. The game is short, but we felt it was as long as it needed to be, because the gameplay could feel tedious over a long stretch of play. To extend the gameplay, if you find it enjoyable, there are time trials of each level that will further test your skill. It follows that a game that challenges your bodily coordination in single player would encourage coordination in co-op. Co-op plays exactly like single player, with the protagonist shared between the players. The interesting feature in Manual Samuel is you can set what each player will be in control of. You can divide the responsibilities evenly, or have one player act as more of a helper, simply controlling the blinking and the breathing. Unfortunately, you can only set these controls right before starting the game from the beginning, so there's no simple way to experiment with the feature and find out which combinations work well. We played using the default control scheme, which had one player controlling the left side and the other controlling the right side, with other functions divided evenly. This required us to be in sync for a lot of the challenges, and we found that the gameplay was generally balanced between us. The slow pace of the levels makes co-op viable until the last level, where the unresponsive controls compounded with the need for quick reaction time makes co-op impossibly difficult. Since the rest of the game isn't that hard, the difficulty of playing together will depend on how well you communicate and how you divvy up the body parts. Barring the final level, the game is a unique and fun co-op experience that doesn't overstay its welcome.
You're a wealthy heir who's never done anything for themselves. You're hit by a car after a fight with your girlfriend, and death challenges you to live manually for a whole day. It's a clever setup to the gameplay, and pokes fun at upper-class exploitation of automation, but don't expect any interesting plot twists or compelling characters. There's obviously a lot of humor, and the dialogue is usually funny, although we grew tired of the script's fascination with the word feces. The story seems appropriate for the game, and serves its purpose of introducing new game mechanics. Playing in co-op doesn't make much sense for the story, except that it adds to the absurdity of the situation.
In one of the last segments, a bug stopped us from progressing near the end, and we had to start a particularly tedious level over again. As the game is so short and interactions are completely contextual, it's difficult to distinguish between what might be a confusing feature and what might be a bug. The game certainly felt buggy at times, although most hiccups corrected themselves quickly. It's hard to recommend in earnest such a short game that embraces tedium as a mechanic. The humor of the gameplay and the dialogue help to elevate it, and the co-op gameplay is unique. But by the end, when the action picks up, the game is bogged down by unresponsive controls that pretty much make it unwinnable in co-op. If you're looking for something short and silly that will ultimately test your patience, this will do it. If you're looking for a game you can actually finish with a partner, this is one we would not recommend.
Sam's coffee is so hot, he blows on it before taking a sip. Sam hurls coffee into his eyes for reasons unknown.